They said, whether you believe McVay or not, this was not a block of Baker Mayfield to the 49ers, which I wouldn't really expect it to be. I mean, the Rams aren't competing in this year's divisional race with the 49ers. It's not like you need to block talent from them because you're going to play against them and for something. Worried about playing against Baker. The Rams are out of it. The Niners are in it. And Baker wouldn't be a long-term solution anyway. They just drafted Trey Lance. I don't think that you would pivot away from Trey Lance for Baker Mayfield this offseason. So I didn't really believe that was a fun story, a theory, but I didn't really believe that it was true. Secondly, the Niners didn't put in a claim on Baker, so I don't think they were interested either. And why would they be? Number two, for the Rams, you're paying $1.3 million to get a look at him, to kick the tires. And maybe you feel like, yeah, you know what? Stafford has been incredibly injury prone this year. He's taken a lot of abuse over the years with his seasons in Detroit. We got the Super Bowl out of him. We can't expect to keep squeezing blood out of a rock. We have to think about what happens next. Totally fair. And I've been very critical of the Rams, but that'd be a totally fair take. Even though you traded away 2 ones for Matthew Stafford, if you got to look to the future already, you got to do it. And maybe Baker is that guy. You're buying a stock very low with the hope that maybe you can fix it and it starts rising. You got to pay him $1.3 million anyway because you claimed him. You didn't sign him as a free agent. He passed through waivers or you claimed him on waivers. So if you've invested more than $1 million in him for the final 5 games of the season, you want to see him play. You don't want to just see him as a backup. Again, I don't expect him to play this week, but the final 4 games of the season, especially after a long week, they'll play tonight, and then he'll have 10 games to get ready for the next game, 10 days to get ready for the next game. Expect Baker to start the final 4 games of the season. And for the Rams, because they don't have draft picks, they have to look under rocks for their quarterback talent that'll come after Matthew Stafford. They've got no draft collateral. They can't move up in a draft. They can't draft a young man that other teams have eyes on. They have to find a guy that nobody else likes. And that's where Baker would qualify right now. So it's worth the lark if you got the 1.3 mil. And that's what's interesting about the Rams' vision of Baker Mayfield. Hey, number 1 draft pick, not that old. Does he give us some type of bridge after Matthew Stafford, which maybe Stafford last season is next year? We'll see. Maybe a little like Jameis Winston getting that olive branch from the Saints after he washed out in Tampa Bay. Number 2, I would say this is really important for Baker Mayfield. I mean, not for nothing, but Baker was pushed out of town in Cleveland, being the only quarterback since Bernie Kosar to win a playoff game there, and they didn't want him. And then got benched not once but twice this year for the pitiful Panthers. He's had his worst statistical season ever this year. And you could say, well, bad team, coach that was fired, bad scenario, but he got benched. And the Panthers would like somebody to be their starting quarterback. If Baker couldn't win that job or keep that job, it makes you wonder. He's damaged goods. 2 teams have said thanks but no thanks. If he goes to the Rams and the final month of the season starts these 4 games and doesn't show something that impresses the Rams or something that impresses somebody else, that could be it as a starting quarterback in the NFL. I mean, there is a path where Baker goes from starting quarterback winning a playoff game for the Browns and 2 years later never starts again in the NFL, at least not as the starter. You know, you'd be a backup and you can get in due to injury. But you'd have to ask this question. The guys you bring in as backups are usually no ego, nose of the grindstone, always prepared, and in the books, in the film room, constantly waiting for the moment. Is that Baker Mayfield? Is Baker cool? No ego, being your backup. Is Baker cool holding a clipboard? Because I think one of the things that Baker has prided himself on is unflappable confidence in himself, chip on his shoulder, and I'll show you. You know, being a backup, you can't really do that. So it's an interesting rehearsal for Baker in the final 4 weeks of the season. Again, I don't expect him to play tonight, but he'll start a couple of these games for the Rams down the stretch, and if he plays poorly, who knows?